Have you ever been sent out into a breakout room for a debrief, and just when the conversation starts getting interesting, you get yanked back into the main room? Or have you ever been asked by the facilitator to discuss like 5 questions in 5 minutes, and by the time you regroup, you've barely made it through the first one? Yeah, I've been in those debriefs too. I think that as the participant, it makes you feel like you've failed in some way, and I've also been the facilitator on the other side, watching the timer count down to 0, and it being very clear that the participants are still in the middle of something. I think this is a really common problem of leaving too many questions for the end, and almost every time I've run an activity or a learning journey several times, I've ended up shifting more and more of the debrief into the actual delivery of the activity. And I think running a good debrief is actually quite difficult. And over the years, I've noticed 3 big traps people tend to fall into when designing debriefs, myself included, and 3 rules that make all the difference. So in this video, that's what I'm going to be sharing with you. But first, hi, my name is Maureen, and I'm here to help you design and facilitate sessions that drive engagement and dialogue so that you can lead meaningful change on the issues that matter most to you. One of my all-time favorite activities to facilitate is a simulation where students get different characters that correspond to different social backgrounds. And in the activity, there are 15 scenarios that take them through life events, and according to their starting level of wealth, health, and access, they navigate those situations differently. And based on how they navigate the game and the decisions they're able to make, they collect points. I'd spent dozens upon dozens of hours preparing this game, so I was quite proud of the simulation and excited to deliver it. I started out running through the 15 different situations in silence. During that time, the students wrote down how the situations affected them and the different points that they would either gain or lose. And then after about 45 minutes of running them through the different situations, there was the big reveal and the chance to debrief how their experience was throughout the simulation. Turns out there was a lot of problems with that. And the few times that I ran the activity this way, the debrief was pretty underwhelming. A lot of the questions I had prepared on the specific situations in the game would be met with students being like, yeah, I forget, can you flip back to that slide? I'd either be met with a lot of silence and I had to really probe to get the students to share about their experience, or what happened a couple different times is that a student brought up something that they were really upset about or they disagreed with in like an early situation in the game, and it was clear to me that they had been hanging on to that frustration since the very start of class and hadn't really been able to pay attention for the rest of the simulation. So the debriefs actually left me feeling like the activity didn't work that well, and I almost stopped running it altogether. That would have been a real shame because today it's one of my favorite activities to run, and I consider it to be one of the most powerful activities that I can deliver. And I credit that shift to one change I made that completely transformed the activity. So what's that shift? Well, it's that I stopped trying to get through all 15 different situations, and instead I now go through one at a time and open up the floor after each one. Now the game only has 7 different scenarios, and after every situation, I ask the students if they'd like to share how their character was affected. We talk about real life parallels. I also ask them why they think that I designed the game this way. I might ask them how they would build on the game to reflect other aspects of reality. So we have a much larger discussion, and it's so much more meaningful and engaging this way. By the end, there's basically nothing to debrief, which really flips on its head how I first facilitated it. And that brings me to my hot take that if you run an activity well, there really shouldn't be anything left to debrief to understand the activity. The debrief should be like a little cherry on the top of the cake. I don't think it should be like the glue that's necessary to put all the pieces together. So I think there are 3 main considerations to have when you're looking at your debrief. First, too many activities are overloaded with content and then try to make sense of it all at the end. Instead, what we need to do is to figure out which questions can be moved up into the activity itself. Don't save all the meaning making for the end. Ask smaller, intentional questions throughout so that the participants are processing as they go. And it also helps build momentum. Usually participation leads to participation, which leads to participation. Like, it doesn't happen all at once. If you wait for the end to ask for their contributions after they've been mostly quiet, you'll almost always get less participation. So ideally, by the time you reach the debrief, the room already feels super connected and alive. 2, stick to 1, maybe 2 Very simple questions. In so many debriefs, participants are just figuring out what they need to answer half the time. I used to facilitate a program that wasn't mine that had like every debrief jammed with 10 different questions, and that creates confusion, it creates frustration, and participants can't go deep on any one thing. I actually feel like what you were communicating to them in this instance is that you don't trust them to go wherever they want to go with the conversation. You're like, okay, if you have even one spare second, here are 5 extra questions that you can spend your time talking about. And number 3, and I think this is the most important, is ask them something that they can't share during the main activity. I think the best debrief questions don't ask participants to digest anything about the content, but instead they invite them to share some personal reflections that we just wouldn't have time to get to in the full group. So they're really an opportunity for participants to deepen their connection, not to just prove that they've understood the content. So I think that if you follow these 3 guidelines, your debrief will be better than like 99% of debriefs out there. I feel like I can make that claim because I was outlining this video and there were literally like 15 different examples that came up for me and that I could have chosen from. So if you're designing a learning experience, here is my rule. Don't design for the perfect debrief at the end. Design so that by the time you get there, there's almost nothing left to say. All right, that's it for this video. I'd love to hear about your experiences with debriefs down below. Like, am I the only one who thinks so many debriefs suck? Am I the only one who's led so many debriefs that suck? Let me know. And also let me know your advice to lead great debriefs. Thank you so much for watching. And with all that said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.